When we think about extinct animals, we always want to see some pictures of them, or at least a single photo. This helps us to dive deeper into its story and learn even more facts and features about its lifestyle. Yet, not all of them were recorded or had a chance to be captured on camera. That's why we have to really appreciate a chance to see pictures of some recently extinct birds, because creatures like the giant moa, host seagull, elephant bird, and many others will never have a chance to be spotted alive. In this video, we will look at the last photos of 5 recently extinct birds that I found interesting to show you. Once abundant in a restricted range, the paradise parrot was a unique bird species native to eastern Australia. Its plumage was enchantingly colorful, even by parrot standards, as it combined turquoise, aqua, scarlet, black and brown shades, giving the paradise parrot an unrepeatable coloration. The tail was almost as long as its body, which was unusual for a bird that spent most of its time on the ground despite being a rapid flyer. These beautiful parrots were observed in pairs or small family groups, and they nested in termite mounds near the ground level. There is not much available information about these magnificent birds. Even before the colonization of Australia, their population was relatively small. One of the latest studies has shown that the population size of the paradise parrot has dramatically decreased with the rise in temperature since the last glacial cycle. However, humans played a significant role in its extinction. With the colonization of Australia, settlers started clearing the territories for farming and settlements. Colonialism has significantly affected their main living area, the grassy woodlands. A severe drought in the region in 1902 may have been a significant factor in their demise. Countless paradise parrots were shot and skinned by bird collectors. They became rare towards the end of the 19th century, and by 1915 were thought to be possibly extinct. For over 20 years, no one has seen the paradise parrot again. However, in 1921, Australian naturalist Alec Chisholm rediscovered the population of these magnificent birds. This photo of the paradise parrot was taken in 1922. It's one of the few pictures that were taken before its extinction. Here we can see a wild parrot entering his nest. Unfortunately, the last confirmed sighting was in 1927, 5 years after this photo was taken. Some individuals have claimed to have seen small groups of these parrots over the next 2 decades, but no evidence has been provided. This is a tragic story, as the paradise parrot is Australia's only extinct native parrot. What an unbelievable creature has gone forever. The greater prayer chicken is an iconic North American bird that used to inhabit numerous parts of the United States, including the East Coast and the Mexican Gulf. One of the most famous aspects of these creatures is their unique and unrepeatable appearance. Male prayer chickens have orange feathers above their eyes and long feathers on the top of their head that can be raised like horns or lay flat along their neck. They also possess a circular, unfeathered neck patch that can be inflated while displaying. The greater prayer chicken has 3 subspecies. The main subspecies, which is known as the greater prayer chicken, is the most popular and abundant. However, today, they inhabit only a small part of their former range, which is now restricted to the Midwest of the United States. The second subspecies, the Atwater prayer chicken, is highly endangered and restricted to the coastal part of Texas. The third subspecies was the Heath Hen, which used to inhabit the east coast of the United States and some parts of New England. Heath hens were smaller, weighing only about 2 pounds or 1 kilogram, with a more reddish plumage, grayish-brown tails, and much thicker bearing throughout the breast and sides. Because of the intense hunting and habitat loss caused by the European colonialists, the population of the East Coast declined rapidly, and by 1870 was wiped out of the mainland. The remaining population survived on the island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. When the mainland population became extinct, about 300 Heath hens were still living on a tiny island. However, because of the feral cats and continued poaching, the small number halved in the next 20 years and by 1900 declined to a catastrophic 70 individuals. This low point became the last hope for saving the Heath hen. The local government became aware of its decline and decided to take some measures to protect it. In 1908, they both established a full ban on hunting the Heath hen and created a new bird reserve where they could live under the governmental protection. Thanks to the taken measures, their population has rapidly increased. Around 2,000 individuals were thriving in the Heath hen reserve by 1916, attracting tourists to observe the birds on their breeding grounds. However, everything has changed in a few months. It was a combination of bad factors that put the end of the Heath hen's history. First, a fire spread across 1/3 of the island, killing about 80% of the population. The following winter was harsh, and goshawks began expanding into the island, further reducing the Heath hen numbers. By 1927, only 11 males and 2 females remained. Despite all efforts to save the remaining population, by 1928 only 1 male survived. The endling was lovingly called the booming ban, and for another 4 years he was observed in the National Reserve searching for mates in a traditional breeding place. This is one of the last photos of the booming ban taken in the early 1930s. Unfortunately, 2 years later, he died for unknown reasons at the age of 8. Heath hens were one of the first bird species that Americans tried to save from extinction, and they almost did it, but the population was already too small and vulnerable to climatic changes and diseases. Even though it wasn't saved from extinction, the Heath hen paved the way for the conservation of other American bird species. Speaking of American birds, one of the most well-known is the passenger pigeon. They were once spread across the major part of the United States and southern Canada, with billions of birds flying in huge flocks across the country. They were known long before the arrival of the Europeans, as Native Americans witnessed their flocks for hundreds of years. They were called passenger due to their unique migratory habitats, which included a constant migration in search of food and nesting sites. The passenger pigeon was a relatively small but very fast flyer, reaching a speed of up to 100 kilometers or 62 miles per hour. Males were slightly larger than females and had a more bright coloration, with a more reddish breast and longer tail. Before Europeans colonized North America, the local population had already hunted the pigeons, but they couldn't harm a population that numbered billions of birds across thousands of kilometers. However, the hunting methods of the indigenous population were different from those of a colonial one. The French and British settlers brought a firearm with them that could kill several dozen birds with one shot. Their meat was a cheap source of protein, and their feathers were used for making pillows. Several factors contributed to their extinction, including the intense deforestation in the United States and uncontrolled hunting, as people thought they couldn't make it go extinct. The population drop was inconsistent, as from 1800 to 1870 the population was declining slowly, but in the next 20 years the numbers decreased rapidly. and passenger pigeons were rarely seen after that. The last confirmed wild bird was shot in Ohio in 1900. The last captive birds were divided into 3 groups around the turn of the 20th century, some of which were photographed alive. This is Martha, the last passenger pigeon, and her photo was taken at the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. Unfortunately, she died the same year, and with her death, one of the largest bird populations in the world became extinct. The next species on the list were never numerous, and its decline was almost inevitable. The South Island snipe was formerly considered to be a subspecies of the subantarctic snipe, but later was elevated to be a full species, thanks to a fossil material from the South Island. The Maori name of this bird is Tutu Kiwi, which probably alludes to its resemblance to a miniature kiwi bird. It was a small, richly patterned bird with a long bill, short legs, wings, and tail. With the Maori colonization of New Zealand and the associated introduction of the Pacific red, the South Island snipe became extinct on a major part of its habitat, including South Island and Stewart Island. However, they managed to survive on a tiny, nearby islands in a total isolation until the late 19th and 20th centuries. But even here, they couldn't manage to hide from outer threats. The accidental introduction of black rats and exotic predators, such as weka, made their small numbers even lower. The last confirmed sightings of these birds came from the Big South Cape and Pukaweka Islands in the early 1960s, and the South Island snipe was thought to be extinct. Yet another hope was in 1964, when workers of the Wildlife Service attempted to catch 2 males and transfer them to a safe place, but they both died in the next few days in captivity. This is the last photo of a male Tutu Kiwi, taken right before an unsuccessful rescue attempt on August 30, 1964. Sadly, its fate was almost predetermined, as invasive species are spread across the entirety of New Zealand. I hope that its extinction plays a significant role in future conservation efforts, as many endemic birds of New Zealand are threatened to become extinct. Wake Island is located in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's a small atoll that played a major role during the World War II when Japanese forces attacked an important American naval and air force base. Among these geopolitical tensions lived a small and flightless rail species. At the time of its first scientific description, the birds were abundant, coexisting with other unique species inhabiting the small atoll. The Wake Island rail was a predominantly grayish-brown bird, featuring narrow white bars on its belly, breast, and flanks. Its upper throat and chin were whitish, while its bill, legs, and feet were brown. It was often seen preying on hermit crabs and digging up the seeds from the soil. Unlike the previous bird species, it was able to coexist with the Polynesian red, which was preying on its eggs. With the American expansion on the island, its nature and habitat began to change. The US government saw the island as the perfect place for the naval base, while Pan American Airways wanted to expand globally by suggesting air transfer between the United States and China. In the 1930s, they built a hotel and a seaplane port, so visitors of the island could witness the Wake Island Rail in its natural habitat. Unfortunately, that was the last years of its calm existence. When Japanese forces attacked the United States, Wake Island was one of the first places where the war began between the two major powers. Japanese forces immediately captured the island, where later thousands of Japanese troops starved because of the bad logistics until the peace agreement in 1945. The inability to fly and the geographic isolation of the island during the World War II combined with the bird's lack of fear of humans, made it an easy victim of overhunting. It's now known that the extinction occurred between 1942 and 1945. This is the last photo of the Wake Island rail that was taken in 1936, when no one could imagine what would happen in the next 5 years with the atoll and its species. Unfortunately, the Wake Island rail is one of the many species that became extinct because of the war actions. I want to attract more attention to this magnificent bird, as it's unrepresented in the media and scientific papers. I hope that one day we will be able to get even more information about it. Thanks for watching the first part of this series. I hope you enjoyed it. Here are some other videos you can watch as well.